It actually also later referred to him as college star, Olympic star, and now pro star Jordan.
He was a star.
I think he was a star. And then in that article as well, it's a different game than what I've been playing, an understated Jordan said, but I feel I'm getting the hang of it. Understatement of the year to say that sort of stuff on the back of a 32-point game with those incredible stat lines in the second game of his preseason career. Fantastic stuff.
Understatement of the last 30 years.
That's very true.
I always like to say that Michael got to play with me for a year at North Carolina. I think it really helped him.
Spectacular player from the beginning.
You can see right away Jordan was going to be a big-time scorer.
And showed what an impact he was going to have on the league.
This is NB 85, celebrating the 30-year anniversary of Michael Jordan's rookie season in the NBA. And now, your hosts, Adam Ryan and Aaron Steen.
Welcome back to the show, Aaron, for episode 5 of NB 85. How are you, mate?
Good, mate. Episode 5 into the Chicago Bulls preseason of 1984.
Yep, indeed, mate. This will be a good episode, I'm sure. And a real quick follow-up from our last episode, a newspaper article that we referenced towards the end of episode 4 suggested that the Bulls training camp commenced just a few days after the 84 Olympic Games ended. Now, that we've since learnt was incorrect. We can confirm now that the Bulls training camp actually took place in late September of 1984. We'll discuss what we know of that training camp in this episode. We'll get straight into the discussion. On August the 10th of 1984, the Houston Rockets traded Caldwell Jones to the Chicago Bulls in exchange for Mitchell Wiggins and the Bulls' second and third round picks in the 85 draft. And the second round selection would actually turn out to be Tyrone Corbin, who was an NBA veteran. It's important to mention this transaction, mate, because Caldwell Jones, aside from being MJ's teammate during that 85 season, he sadly passed away recently of a heart attack.
Good to paint a picture for the other listeners as to the quality of the content for episode 5. Our first point to bring up is a trade of Mitchell Wiggins for Caldwell Jones. So we're off to an all-star Hall of Fame start here for episode 5. But yes, rest in peace to Caldwell Jones. It's been mentioned that the Bulls had a 5-guard rotation before the trade of Mitchell Wiggins, so this was clearly done for 2 reasons. Firstly, to make room for MJ in the backcourt, plus the Bulls were also very thin in the middle and would be helped by the addition of 2-time All-Defensive Team member Caldwell Jones, who had averaged 10 points and 7 rebounds in 81 games as the Philadelphia 76ers starting center in the 84 season.
Good stats you're dropping already, mate, so this will be a very insightful episode, no doubt.
The Chicago Bulls sign Michael Jordan.
Now, I want to quickly refer to an article from August the 16th in 1984. It's titled, Wilmington's Jordan Ready to Join Bulls. In the article, it mentions how Jordan's then attorney, and he'd later be his super agent, David Falk, and Bulls management, and that was mostly GM Rod Thorne, who's being referred to, they were in negotiation stages of Jordan's first pro contract, and it suggests in the article that Jordan wouldn't sign for less than $500,000 in his first year as a pro. And there's a quick quote from Jordan in this article that is a recurring theme in most all of MJ's comments that he made prior to his rookie debut with the Bulls, and it is, I'm not going to say I'm going to go out there and do something spectacular just to change it around. I'm just going to go out there and do the best I can. Hopefully, as a team, we can change it around. So he was very understated throughout all of his comments, as most likely would be the best way to play it in the lead up to him turning pro, but he was very understated. I thought that's worth mentioning. Also, mate, Jordan was a very busy boy after he finished the 84 Olympics. There's another article I want to quickly chat about, which was on August the 25th, and it was titled, Olympic Hero Jordan Gets Keys to Hometown. Jordan returned back home to Wilmington in North Carolina, and on Friday, August the 24th, there was a ceremony held at Thalian Hall. Originally, it was scheduled to take place at Riverfront Park, but due to rain, it was moved into the hall. And MJ was honoured for his gold medal winning heroics at the Olympics in 84, of course. He was presented with a key to the city by Mayor William Schwartz, and the mayor said to Jordan as he presented the key, "It opens up our hearts to you." And to top it all off, Laney High School principal Kenneth McLaurin, not sure how you pronounce his name, he was on hand to retire MJ's Buccaneers jersey. Perhaps the best description of the event is this: Teenagers, men in business suits, and mothers with their children leaped to their feet and cheered when Jordan entered the hall and walked down the main aisle. It was at this ceremony where MJ also presented his mother with the gold medal, as famously shown on NBA Entertainment's Michael Jordan Come Fly With Me. So some good memories there, mate, all happening in the space of a few hours at this presentation.
Laney High principal Kenneth McLaurin, who also featured on Come Fly With Me, the moment when he announced that Laney were going to retire Jordan's number 23 jersey, you've actually dug up a photo recently of this moment, Adam, one that neither of us had ever seen before, which is really cool. And another important moment in the ceremony was MJ donated his US Olympic practice uniform to the New Hanover County Museum. And I'm sure on knowing this that any MJ fan worth a damn would make that museum a must-see.
Yeah, definitely, mate. Some good points there. And I will include that photo that I uncovered of Jordan having his high school jersey retired. I'll put that in the show notes of the episode. And dare I say it, they'll be found at inallairness.com/NB85-5. Almost immediately after the 84 LA Olympics, the speculation of the Bulls signing Jordan was increasing steadily. On September the 11th, in many newspaper articles across the country, Chicago Bulls spokesman, a name that most listeners will be familiar with, Tim Hallam, said that Jordan would sign a contract with the Bulls the following day. Now, there's some really interesting information here to do with the signing of the contract itself, and some stuff that I learnt as recently as today, just before we recorded, mate, that changed up a little bit from what I thought to know in the past. Negotiations on the contract were actually completed at 1 a.m. on Wednesday, September the 12th. At a news conference in Chicago on that same day, Jordan, accompanied by his parents, signed what was first described as a 7-year deal. It was a unique contract, including his famous love of the game clause, which effectively allowed MJ to participate in any pickup game wherever or whenever he wanted. The contract had numerous individual performance incentives, which MJ achieved, such as making the All-Star team and drawing higher crowd numbers to Chicago Stadium. At the time, the deal made MJ the highest paid Bulls player ever. It eclipsed an Artis Gilmore deal from 1978. However, he was only, and I use that term loosely, the third highest paid rookie ever, behind number 1 pick in the 84 draft, Akeem Olajuwon, and the other member of the Twin Towers, Ralph Sampson.
The performance incentives that you mentioned with his Bulls contract would also pop up a little bit later on in his search for a sneaky deal in his rookie season in the NBA, which we'll cover off a little bit later on.
Indeed, we will, mate. As I alluded to a moment ago, in terms of Jordan's contract, however, there's an article that I came across just today, which is titled Jordan's Pact is Reported Even Richer, from September the 14th of 84, and it claimed that Tim Hallam's comment at the news conference that MJ signed for 7 years was in fact incorrect, and rather it was a 5-year deal with a further 2-year option. So this was completely news to me. Corinne Zartler, I may have pronounced her name incorrectly there, she was the Bulls' assistant public relations director at the time, and she's quoted in this article as saying, Michael said at the press conference the Bulls could say whatever they wanted to about the length of the contract. This was quite surprising, and I'd always believed that MJ's initial contract was actually a 7-year deal. Did you know anything different to that?
All brand new information, mate. A 5-year deal from his rookie season would have taken him up to the 89-90 season, and I'm pretty confident that his deal that had him on pretty modest money, or a deal that had him on pretty modest money, took him right through until the 96 season. So I'd love to know some details on if he took the extra 2 years or if he re-signed a new contract at that point in time.
That was completely news to me, and I've seen some photos from about 1988, and MJ is standing alongside Jerry Krause holding up what looks to be some sort of contract of sorts or some other document. So I'm not sure if he renegotiated towards the end of that first 5-year deal. I don't even know, but I'd always thought it was a 7-year contract, and then today found this other article which disputes that. So if anybody listening would like to correct or add any other details of what we've just said, that'd be much appreciated. So get in touch with us if that is the case.
Jerry Reinsdorf would have been a smart boy to have not really concerned himself with the actual length of Jordan's contracts and just renegotiated, whenever he had the opportunity, and or whenever MJ's people brought it up to him.
My two favourite news conference quotes are these, and it's from an article which is titled Jordan's Signature, Step Up for Bulls, from September the 13th. The first one's from GM Rod Thorne, and he's talking about the negotiation process, and he says, there was a lot of give and take. We gave and they took. That was a good one. Nice, short and sweet. And MJ also backed it up with another good comment, and he says, I just want to be able to fit in and help the team. It's not going to be the Michael Jordan show. So I thought that was quite amusing. But of course, he just played the understated card there. You don't want to try and build the hype up too much before the season even commenced. That same article also offers another key piece of info for this NB85 series, ending with the final sentence which says, Jordan will report to the Bulls training camp on September 26.
There it is.
That was actually in contrast to another article we read that we mentioned earlier at the start of this episode. As a final footnote to the news conference, Jordan went to Wrigley Field in Chicago and he watched the Chicago Cubs beat the Montreal Expos. A little bit of trivia there for you.
I'm sure that he probably would have got the opportunity to throw out a first pitch at some point in time too.
Yeah, I'm not actually too sure when he would have first done that. I'm sure it would have happened before the night before he announced his retirement in 1993.
Yeah, I can still recall an image of him throwing out that first pitch.
He's wearing all denim, isn't he?
At the old Comiskey Park that the White Sox played at in double denim.
Yeah, double denim. And one of the Chicago papers ran with, "Say it ain't so, Mike," headline the next day with a photo of him pitching the ball. And from there, it was just world news and stock market just dropped. It's crazy stuff.
And tears flowed.
Tears flowed, all right. I was crying for a week, mate.
Yep.
Chicago Bulls, 1984-85 training camp.
Now, information was scarce. We did what we could. I want to highly recommend that people look at buying Roland Lazenby's recently released book, Michael Jordan, The Life. Now, though I haven't read the whole book, I've skipped to some of the relevant chapters just to familiarise myself as best possible for our podcast series, and thoroughly enjoyed what I've read thus far. Roland covers the Bulls training camp that took place at Angel Guardian Gym in Chicago in part 5 of his book, and it's chapter 16, titled The Rookie. So definitely worth having a look at that book for sure. It's getting some fantastic reviews, to say the least. And another quick thing to mention, mate, Sam Smith, author of The Jordan Rules and obviously a Bulls.com columnist, he has a forthcoming book which details the history of Chicago and Bulls basketball and Jordan's part in that during his first NBA season and beyond. Sam's book is to be released later this month to coincide with MJ's first regular season game that took place on October the 26th of 1984. So depending on when you're listening to this, it's either going to be released soon or it's already been out. So do check it out. And I'll do a bit of shameless self-promotion, mate, before we go any further. inallairness.com/Amazon. If you go to that website address, any purchases that you make through that link within 24 hours, either those books or anything else in the store, will help support the podcast, as you like to do from time to time, Aaron.
At what point does the term shameless self-promotion become standard?
It's almost just baked in automatically to every episode.
It's baked on like a lasagna tray, never ever to come off. Anyone who hasn't read Roland Lazenby's book, Michael Jordan, The Life, I can't recommend highly enough that you do so. I've been a Bulls fan for 25 years, and it's one of the best, mainly because of the new content it has about Jordan's early life, and it even starts back before he was born. So, yeah, it's all brand new stuff, which makes it a fantastic read for any Jordan or Bulls fans or any basketball fans really in general. And to have books the likes of Roland's book and now a new one from Sam Smith, which with perfect timing for our podcast series will give us all an insight into his first season that we really haven't been privy to before. All very exciting, mate.
100% agree, mate. It's just great news, and I'm really hanging out to read Roland's book because at the moment I'm still devouring Showtime by Jeff Pearlman, and once that one's finished, I'll then start in earnest on The Life. Very excited to get into that one, but what I have read, which has helped me enormously with this podcast series, has been fantastic.
It has to be said, it's a Michael Jordan rookie season podcast, and the man is shamelessly, there's that word again, shamelessly talking about a LA Lakers book.
I shouldn't deviate away from the Bulls at all, should I suppose? But I am loving Showtime for what it's worth. All right, so
Great book.
Another article I wanted to mention, mate, this is to do with the training camp. One of the only things I could find to do with it. It's from during the NBA playoffs time in 1985. from May the 16th to be precise. The article's called Winning Teammates Respect, Toughest Aspect for Jordan. And there's a great quote in there, and it says, you come into... Hello to Wilkins, your dog there in the background by the sound of things, mate. It says, you come into training camp with all those big expectations, and the other guys are wondering, is it true about this guy or is it a put-on? You have to gain the respect of other players. That's where it starts. They want you to prove you are what people say you are. Now, that's a comment from Jordan. And the article goes on to say, for the Bulls, proof came in training camp. There was one particular moment that Jordan recalled as a turning point. I stole the ball and broke away, he said. The only guy between me and the basket was Jawan Oldham. He's a centre, 7'2". I challenged him and I dunked the ball. The gym went crazy. From their reaction, I knew then I was accepted. So I found that really cool. An article from during the playoffs in 85, referring back to this training camp in late September and early October, that Jordan threw down a monster dunk over Jawan Oldham, and then that earned the respect of his teammates, and they sort of knew he was for real. So that was quite an interesting find.
Nike secures Jordan's signature.
One of the more significant moments off the court for Jordan in the lead-up to his rookie year was when he signed his shoe contract. And in Roland Lazenby's book, Michael Jordan, The Life, he details the great story behind the rise of Sonny Vaccaro and how he came to work for Nike, and the intriguing background behind MJ's incredible deal with the company. It's part 5, titled Black Power, and it's chapter 15. You've got some things, Aaron, that you'd like to talk about here?
I knew quite a few details that surrounded Jordan's first contract with Nike, having been a fan for so long, and I'm a self-professed sneakerholic. A lot of these details, though, have been expanded on for me recently thanks to Roland Lazenby's book and Swoosh, the unauthorized story of Nike. Both of these books have dedicated chapters to the process in which Jordan signed on with Nike, and I definitely give both of those books a lot of credit in painting a much broader picture for me on the topic. Nike's earnings were on the decline in 1984 for the first time since the company was founded. They felt that they had too many players on their payroll. They even went to the lengths of telling currently contracted players that if they could get a better deal with another shoe company, that they would let them out of their contract and even pay them to do so. So quality over quantity is what they wanted, and Michael Jordan was their number one target. The other two players that were being considered by Nike as their basketball superstar were Charles Barkley and Patrick Ewing.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that Nike would have considered releasing these guys from existing contracts in a bid to lure Jordan in the first place, but it is staggering as an outsider looking in that this was the case.
Yeah, Nike felt as though going through this process, letting these guys out of their contract and even paying them was going to save them money on the, I guess, what they saw as unnecessarily large amounts of money that they were forking out for players that they felt didn't really deserve a contract. And it was on a gut feel from a gentleman named Sonny Vaccaro, who was a self-made businessman from Pittsburgh who had been working with Nike for 7 years up to that point. He'd seen MJ play and told Nike in reference to their basketball budget for that upcoming year to, and I quote, give it all to the kid. Vaccaro had even bet his job on MJ being a success for the company. So that's how strongly he felt about Jordan.
Yeah, incredible, really. And I was transfixed reading the chapter from Roland's book about Vaccaro's background. So it's a really interesting and fascinating read.
And the offer that Nike put to Jordan, now considering that the previous highest sneaker deal for an NBA player was James Worthy's deal with New Balance, which paid him $150,000 a year. Nike's offer to Jordan was $2.5 million over 5 years, so $500,000 a year to wear their sneakers. They also offered him a signing bonus, annuities, 25% royalty on each pair of Air Jordan sold. And it was said that David Falk could have got up to 50%, but with no guarantee that the Air Jordan would sell. He wanted more cash up front in the form of the other $2.5 million. Jordan was also to receive royalties on all Nike Air basketball sneakers that were sold above the 400,000 units that they had sold the year before. The deal was expected to have been worth $7 million to Jordan over the 5-year deal, and it basically made Jordan a partner in the company. It was a huge risk for Nike to invest so much into a guy who is about to play for the hapless, cocaine-ridden Chicago Bulls. If Jordan happened to be a failure, then it was very likely that Nike would have went under.
Crazy stuff, and incredible figures that are being mentioned at this time in the 1980s.
Nike had one clause on the contract, and we spoke before about Chicago having performance incentives on his playing contract as well. Their clause was that Jordan must either win Rookie of the Year, be an All-Star, or average at least 20 points per game in his first 3 seasons, and he did all 3 in his first year, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's fantastic stuff.
It was said that a part of UNC coach Dean Smith's push to get Mike to turn pro was actually influenced by the potential sneaker deals that were coming, such as this mega deal from Nike. Nike had been talking about marketing ideas for Jordan even during the Olympic Games. So it was even before Jordan had finished playing in the Olympics that the Air Jordan name and the original Wings logo were conceived. MJ, however, was a really big fan of Adidas and even told David Falk to do whatever he can to get in with Adidas. He didn't know much about Nike, and his first meeting with Sonny Vaccaro wasn't very convincing, as Jordan thought that Sonny looked like a mafioso, and even told Vaccaro during the meeting. And this shows MJ's disinterest at the time in the sneaker business, that all he wanted was a new car in the deal. Jordan didn't want to go to the second meeting with Nike in Oregon, but his mum insisted. Jordan was quite tired at the time from having gone to several meetings, and told his mum that he didn't want to go to a meeting for a sneaker that he didn't like. So he wasn't convinced at all. He didn't like the red and black of the Jordan 1 and called it the devil's colours, and he apparently sat completely expressionless all through that second meeting. However, Jordan was left impressed with the pitch from Nike, but was still very determined to sign with Adidas. MJ said to an Adidas rep that he knew that if they came even close to the deal that Nike was offering him, that he'd sign with Adidas, but both of the deals from Converse and Adidas didn't come close, unfortunately for them.
It just shows you how much, as you mentioned, he didn't seem to be that emotionally invested in the actual offer, that he was willing to sign with Adidas if they even came close to what the Nike deal was. So there's really some just incredible background behind the actual signing taking place.
And it wasn't even that he liked Adidas sneakers more than Converse or Nike sneakers. He thought that Adidas had the best tracksuits.
I'm pretty sure that during his Carolina days, he'd practice in Adidas. When it was game time, he actually had to wear the UNC-sponsored Converse.
A part of Converse's pitch to Jordan was that they had Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, and Dr. J, and said to the Jordans that we'll treat you like all of our other superstars, which wasn't exactly going to set them apart from the other deals.
It got me thinking, you've got to wonder, were Converse actually privy to any of the details about the pitch from Nike? Because if so, it was obviously a huge mistake for them not to focus more specifically on MJ. And I guess that as soon as they said, we'll treat you like all our other superstars, it probably had the opposite effect to obviously what they were hoping for.
And we've mentioned it 100 times already, mate, that hindsight's a very handy thing, and we can look back having seen Jordan's career and what he became. And it's easy for us to say it's amazing that they didn't sign him. But I guess at that point in time, companies like Converse had Bird, Magic, and Irving, and didn't really see MJ as being any bigger than what those guys were, so they weren't willing to offer him any more.
Well said.
Also, at this point in time, Adidas were in a transition state as a company. Tensions had been rising between the owners over a succession plan, and apparently it showed during the meetings, as James Jordan felt that Adidas were very underprepared for the meeting. And a third, more unlikely company that placed a bid was a company called Spot Built, who I think I may have heard of them once or twice, heard the name.
That's 1 or 2 times more than me, mate. I've never heard of them.
There you go. That paints a picture for you. They were actually a family-owned shoe brand whose number one endorser at the time was NFL superstar O.J. Simpson, and made the pitch to Jordan at the recommendation of O.J. himself. And a funny comment in hindsight was O.J. Simpson telling Spot Built of Jordan, "This kid in North Carolina, he's the next me."
Yeah, that could be interpreted a number of ways, but of course during the 1980s there wasn't too many people that were more widely known and popular than O.J. Simpson, so I guess in hindsight definitely it's quite a funny and alarming comment for sure. The whole backstory to this deal coming to fruition is fascinating.
During the 1994 finals, could you envision that Ford truck hammering down the freeway in LA with Michael Jordan at the steering wheel? I don't think so, OJ. So
no.
All of this led to Jordan signing his first contract with Nike, and a global phenomenon was born.
This is NB85.
Outside of the other facts and the numbers of Jordan's deal with Nike, I've made some observations myself, and this is a topic that you and I have spoken to each other about in the past, and I've also spoken to Adam Howes about this as well. But Michael Jordan wore the black and red Nike Airships during the preseason. I've seen pictures of him wearing this colorway versus New York at MSG, and also during practices. MJ's first regular season appearance in the Air Jordan 1 was apparently on November 17 versus the 76ers at Chicago Stadium, though neither of us have actually seen the games that immediately preceded this one, to know for sure if that was actually the first game that he wore them. And I've seen Complex.com actually say that he debuted the Jordan 1 in a preseason game, which I haven't seen any evidence of before or since researching for this episode. Nike banned the black and red Air Jordan 1, apparently, on October 18, but MJ hadn't worn the shoes yet. So it raises the question, did the black and red Airship get banned by the league? And then Nike used the fine paying and exposure generated from the ban to promote the upcoming Jordan 1 as the other banned shoes. We all know that the black and red ones as the shoe that apparently were banned by the NBA, though I've never seen him in a regular season game in the black and red ones apart from the slam dunk competition in Indianapolis. I've only ever seen him in the Airship and in the home version or the white, red and black version of the Air Jordan 1s. I guess sneakers back then weren't what they are today, and perhaps the attention wasn't paid at the time to which shoe the NBA had actually banned. So my summary is that it was the Airship that was the banned shoe, and Nike used it to promote the Air Jordan 1, which, as a side note, retailed for $65 on April 1st, 1985, to pretty good success, it should be stated.
Yeah. We've been talking about understatements and understating comments. That's certainly one of them. It wasn't an April Fool's joke, even though it sounds like it in 2014, because $65 for a pair of Air Jordan 1, I'd take that every day of the week. And also, mate, you've also raised some really intriguing questions there, and hopefully one day the full light of day will be shed on this topic, and then we'll actually have a definitive answer.
It just so happened that in 1985, $65 for a pair of basketball sneakers was a little on the expensive side, which, again, in hindsight, 30 years later, amuses me greatly.
No doubt about that. It's all relative, of course. For more specifics about the shoe deal and all the background with Nike and Sonny Vaccaro, definitely have a look at those books that we were chatting about. Roland Lazenby's Michael Jordan, The Life. And what was the name of that Nike one? Swoosh?
Swoosh, the unauthorized story of Nike and the men who played there.
Yep, so we'll include links to those books in the show notes, and you can find out some more specific details.
Chicago Bulls, 1984-85 preseason games.
I'm sure you'll join me in thanking our good friend Todd Spear for some of this information that he's presented to us to help us with this preseason discussion. Todd is a marvel at finding stuff on Google, and he submitted a few bits and pieces of information that we've included when we reference some of the stats and things that happened during the preseason. So thank you very much, Todd, at Todd Spear, SPEHR 35 on Twitter.
Some of the stuff that Todd comes up with is just remarkable, and yeah, I do call him the doyen of 1980s NBA box scores.
Oh, for sure. So thank you, Todd. These are Jordan's first preseason games in the lead up to his rookie debut. They played 7 games in total in October of 84. They went 5-2 over the exhibition schedule. We're going to briefly chat about each of these games. The first game Jordan played with Chicago Bulls was October the 5th, and the Bulls were 102-98 victors against the Indiana Pacers. The game was played at the Civic Center in Peoria, Illinois, in front of a bumper crowd of 2,500 people. This is one of the most amazing things that I've learnt about Jordan's first preseason exhibitions. They went around different areas around America and played in some more regional cities and towns. And some of the attendance figures are quite staggering when you think about it. Looking back, the people that were in attendance, the recipients of an absolute treat most of the times, because Jordan put on a show in pretty much every one of these exhibition games. And just in terms of the stats, mate, MJ had 18 points in 29 minutes of play. He started the game on the bench and entered the game with about 3 minutes to play in the first quarter. He missed his first field goal attempt, then hit a 25-footer towards the end of the first quarter. So his first NBA points came from a 25-foot jumper, if you don't mind.
Just to consider how important this game was in the annals of basketball history, an NBA.com article from when MJ was named to the Hall of Fame back in 2009 said that of the game, there was barely a mention in the Chicago media as the Chicago Cubs were in San Diego blowing what seemed a certain World Series appearance. It would be prophetic because you could count on both for the next decade. The Cubs blowing opportunities and Jordan carrying the Bulls to victory. The same article went on to say, even in the exhibition season before his rookie campaign, players and coaches were sure that the Rockets and Blazers would regret their picks. And Bernard King, the eventual league leading scorer for that upcoming season, seemed sure as well when he spoke to Hoop magazine after a 1984 preseason game. All I can say, King said, is that people in Chicago are in for a real treat.
I love that. And I love anything to do with Bernard King as well. So that's doubly good to hear that. And you mentioned the word prophetic earlier. That's an absolute certainty that those words from Bernard were prophetic as well. Also, mate, just a quick little tangent here. You've recently visited the old Wikipedia page for Peoria in Illinois and made a slight addition to the page.
Not known as a person who'd ever made a Wikipedia edit in the past. I went to the Peoria, Illinois page on Wikipedia just to read all about the fact that MJ had played his first game as a Bull there, only to find that there was no mention of it. I noticed and had heard that Wikipedia is this a word? Editable? I decided that there was really no point in having a page on Peoria, Illinois. Hello to the inhabitants of the wonderful town of Peoria. There was no point in having the page without having mention of the fact that Jordan played his first professional game there. So I made a change to the Peoria, Illinois Wikipedia page.
And when I mentioned before that there was a bumper crowd of 2,500, that figure I've obtained from Roland Lazenby's fantastic book that we referenced earlier, Michael Jordan, The Life. There's very scant details online about this game, so the crowd came from Roland's book, and some of the info I mentioned about that game came from a lone newspaper article that I could find about the game itself. So the Bulls are 1-0 after that first exhibition game. On October the 7th, they won 107-100 against the Kansas City Kings. That was their final season before they became the Sacramento Kings in 1986. And that was played at a place called Kiel Auditorium in St. Louis, Missouri. The Bulls were 2-0 in the exhibition series. MJ had 32 points in only 27 minutes. Incredible stat lines, 10 of 11 from the field, 12 of 13 from the free throw line. Just for good measure, he grabbed 4 rebounds and had 2 assists, and also sat out the first quarter. He had a... How incredible are those stats, really?
Yeah.
He had a 3-point play with 38 seconds remaining, and that sealed the victory for the Bulls. Orlando Woolridge had 15 points. Eddie Johnson, former guest of the podcast on episode 41, hashtag shameless self-promotion, had 22 points for the Kings. Good start for Chicago there, off to a 2-0 in the exhibition series, and what a great game from Jordan into his second preseason performance to have 32 points in not even 30 minutes of play.
The man's hashtagging his own catchphrases, scary stuff. I would love to see this game because there was an article on the 9th of October after the game from the Herald written by Jim O'Donnell. Jim wrote that Jordan was already showing signs that he really might be the greatest player in the 19-year history of the Bulls. A sellout is expected for the next game at East Chicago, Washington High because of MJ's galactic reputation.
Yeah, that's one of the great quotes there, and I was going to mention that if you didn't actually. So that's from an article which was titled "No Parades Yet for Undefeated Bulls." Just an incredible description there, and I loved it, so I'm glad that we both were going to touch on that little comment. It actually also later referred to him as college star, Olympic star, and now pro star Jordan.
He was a star.
I think he was a star. And then in that article as well, it's a different game than what I've been playing, an understated Jordan said, but I feel I'm getting the hang of it. Understatement of the year to say that sort of stuff on the back of a 32-point game with those incredible stat lines in the second game of his preseason career. Fantastic stuff.
Understatement of the last 30 years.
That's very true. Later that day, on October the 9th, the Bulls took on the Milwaukee Bucks at Washington High School in East Chicago, Indiana. And the attendance this time around was 5,500 people. The Bulls were 100-87 victors over the Bucks. MJ had 22 points. He was the, as Marv Albert would say, high man of the game with 22 points. He was 6 of 13 from the field, 10 of 12 from the free throw line. He had 6 rebounds and 3 assists, and he only played 24 minutes for the game. Orlando Woolridge had 14 points, Quentin Daly 13, and Rod Higgins 12 points, one of MJ's great friends. For Milwaukee, Randy Brewer, 7'3", I think he is, had 17 points, and Alton Lister had a double-double, 10 points and 10 boards.
Randy Brewer is that irrelevant that you can't even get his height right on the podcast.
Uncalled for. Isn't he 7'3"?
I thought he was 7'4", but
okay,
I could be wrong.
Well,
I'm not, but I could be.
Really? You're quite confident. I'm going to go to Basketball Reference, mate, just while we're chatting here. I'm sure this is riveting stuff for the listeners. Randy Brewer is 7'3", my friend.
There we go.
Very poor form on your behalf. All right.
I understated Randy's Hall of Fame career.
Deary me. Hello to Randy if you're listening. The first loss of the preseason, mate, happened on October the 13th. The Bulls went down 99-84 to the Milwaukee Bucks in a repeat matchup. This time it was at the Mecca in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And the attendance this time was slightly more impressive, 8,314. So the Bulls dropped to 3-1. MJ had 18 points and came off the bench. And in the information I found about this game, it also said, and I quote, a spectacular slam in the fourth quarter. Unfortunately, we may not ever get to see that because it does not exist on video as far as I'm aware. Sidney Moncrief, who was a 5-time All-Star, he scored 19 of his 23 points in the third quarter alone. So what a great effort there. Milwaukee outscored the Bulls 37-16 in the third quarter of this game. Recently acquired from the Clippers, Terry Cummings had 17 points in Orlandis.com/17. Craig Hodges and Ricky Pierce in Orlandis.com/28 did not play due to knee injuries. Now, a little interesting fact about this game, mate. This was the annual MACC Fund Game. Not sure if it was just pronounced as the MAC Fund Game, but it stood for the Midwest Athletes Against Childhood Cancer. There's a very cool print ad that I found in research for this episode, and I'll include that in the show notes to this episode. It has in text on the ad featuring Olympic gold medalist Michael Jordan as part of the promotion for people in attendance. So look at the show notes for the episode. It'll be inall.com/NB85-5. So the Bulls were 3-1 after that contest, mate.
Quite amazing that it was the MAC charity game and that Michael Jordan was playing in his rookie season. To look back in hindsight, that they only received an attendance of 8,314.
At least the attendance was slightly better than previous games, but still 8,000 plus in the Mecca. That still wouldn't have been even close to being a full house. October the 15th of 1984, the Chicago Bulls took on the New York Knicks, the first meeting of the Bulls and the Knicks in Jordan's career. And the Bulls were 1-point winners, 91-90. The game was played at the Civic Center in Glens Falls in New York. The attendance this time around was 6,386. So the Bulls moved to 4-1 in the preseason. MJ had 20 points, including the go-ahead basket with just 2 minutes left in the game. Chicago were down 48-41 at the half. Steve Johnson had 13 points, and Charles Jones and Rod Higgins had 12 points apiece for the Bulls. Bernard King had 20 points to lead the Knicks, and Eddie Lee Wilkins?
Eddie Lee.
I put in Eddie Lee Wilkins because the article actually referred to him as Eddie Wilkins, and I wasn't happy with that, so I've added the Lee, and I'm pretty sure it's Eddie Lee Wilkins, isn't it?
Yes.
Eddie Lee Wilkins had a chance to win the game at the buzzer, but the shot fell short, so the Bulls hung on to win 91-90.
What jersey number did Eddie Lee Wilkins wear for the Knicks?
45.
Correct. In this game also, the other Bulls, as Adam mentioned before, were down 48-41 at the half, but actually came back in the third quarter, led by 3 consecutive buckets from Chicago Bulls household name Dirk Minifield, who, after researching who the guy was, never actually played a regular season game for the Bulls.
Yeah, that was a really good little stat there that you pulled out. And I think you said that he surfaced in the 1986 season playing for another team. Was it the Cavs?
Yeah, he didn't actually play a regular season game at all in the 85 season. His first regular season action for an NBA team was with Cleveland the following season.
Very good, mate. Also, trying to throw me under the bus there with that Eddie Lee Wilkins jersey number. I was never going to get that wrong, mate. I'm a superstar.
I knew you knew.
Okay, that's all right then. I've lost it. Where am I even up to? All right. Now, 3 days later, mate, the Bulls would have a return meeting with the New York Knicks, but this time it was on the hallowed Madison Square Garden. Hello, Madison Square Garden. How are you? No, it was on the Madison Square Garden floor. That was a terrible joke. I'll start again. See, this is the sort of stuff I shouldn't do. I'll have a stupid thought come into my head, and I think, yeah, I might make a little joke about this. Then I say the joke, goes down like a lead balloon, and then I've got to end up editing it out of the episode.
We've started off our recordings of the NBA 85 series on several 8, 9, 10-game winning streaks, and we've had the odd loss here and there. We've spoken about the hallowed the other hallowed turf of the LA Lakers 1972 winning streak of 33 straight games. In episode 5, in the recording of this episode, we have dropped 10 of the last 12, including a 45-point blowout to the Kansas City Kings. Or we have also had a very similar season to the 2013-2014 Indiana Pacers.
Yeah, well, it started off well, and then we've fallen into an absolute heap and missed the playoffs almost. That was a great comment to finish with. We had a 45-point loss to the Kansas City Kings. Very well played. All right. 3 days later, mate, on October the 18th, the Bulls had a return meeting with the New York Knicks. This time it was at Madison Square Garden, the world's most famous arena in New York, of course. The Bulls were 112-93 victors, this time a much bigger margin of victory. Quinton Daly had 28 points for the Chicago Bulls. What a great performance from Quinton. And MJ had 23 points, and this was the Bulls' highest point total of the preseason. On the day of this game, MJ did an interview courtside at MSG, and it includes footage of him in practice, which you alluded to briefly during the discussion about the shoes, if memory serves correct. And that footage is fantastic. It shows him throwing down some dunks and all sorts of stuff. I'll include a link to the said video in the show notes. Let's hope it does remain online, because sometimes YouTube clips are removed, but definitely check that out. It's some great footage of MJ. It's about 4 to 5 minutes of him just chatting away to the commentator courtside while they're still practicing in the background. You've seen the clip too, mate?
I have. Is that the one that I watched only moments before we started recording tonight?
Probably was, mate. That would have been the one, I'd say.
Is that from the preseason or the regular season?
That was preseason.
Are you sure?
And then it shows highlights of Jordan's first pro game at New York from the 8th of November.
I actually thought that interview was from just before his first regular season game at Madison Square Garden, man. So that, now that I know that it's from the other preseason game, that gives it even more weight. So because any kind of footage, any kind of material at all from the preseason is rare as hen's teeth, mate.
The interview itself and the footage of the practice session are definitely from the preseason game that we talked about on October 18. but the way it's edited together, the clip looks like that was just prior to the regular season game that they then showed highlights of a few minutes after. So, yeah, really cool footage of MJ in the preseason, which is the only footage that I think I've ever seen on video. Some great stuff there, mate. One more game to go in the preseason schedule. The Bulls were 5-1 after that blowout victory in New York. The very next day, they took on the Kansas City Kings in Jordan's Chicago Stadium debut. When I say debut, I'll emphasise the syllable boo, because in this game, from an article that was titled Bulls Preseason Closes with Defeat, October the 20th, 1984, the article even references Chicago's boo vultures, they're referred to as, saying that they were already in January form, out to get the much-maligned Dave Corzine. So I found that quite interesting.
MJ's first game at the stadium, and he was welcomed by the clearly jaded Bulls fans when they were booing the heck out of poor old Dave Corzine during the game.
Talk about a harsh crowd. Kansas City won the game 103-89, so it wasn't even really close. The attendance was 8,644 people, many empty seats. The Bulls finished the preseason 5-2. Jordan had 25 points, though, in his debut at Chicago Stadium, so that's very good. Homegrown product, Eddie Johnson, had 24 points, 12 of which came in the fourth quarter for the Kansas City Kings. Just after the game, Jordan was quoted as saying, "I like what I saw." Then he went on to say, "I feel bad that we couldn't win this one for the fans." An interesting first game at Chicago Stadium with mixed results. Great for Jordan's personal stat line, but an ordinary way for them to finish off their pre-season before they headed into the regular season some 7 days later.
I don't feel sorry for the other fans at Chicago Stadium on that night, one little bit, considering what they were about to enjoy.
True, and only 8,644 people, according to the newspaper article, can actually say that they were there in person at MJ's first appearance in Chicago Stadium. So that's definitely the plus side. That was the end of the preseason schedule, mate. They finished 5-2. Pretty good results overall. Kevin Lockery would have been very happy with the preseason form, I'm sure. There were countless articles that I could reel off and refer to here in terms of in that pre-season. However, there's just one I'll talk about briefly. It's titled Jordan Appears to Be For Real. Understated headline again. And this was from October the 24th. One paragraph I'd love to read. It says, Jordan is for real, if pre-season statistics are any indication. Averaging 30 minutes of playing time, Jordan averaged 22.7 points while shooting 59% from the floor, 86% from the free throw line. He also averaged 5 rebounds and totaled 19 assists, 14 steals, and 7 blocked shots. I think he also sold hot dogs at halftime at some of the venues as well. That may or may not be true. Furthermore, Jordan did it while fluctuating between point guard, small forward, and shooting guard, his natural position. That's a pretty good summation. Is that even a word?
I'd use it.
Okay, we'll go with that. That's a pretty good summation of MJ's impact in his first preseason as a Chicago Bull.
And it's also funny that they were wowed by Jordan's stat line from his preseason games when in 82 regular season games as a rookie, his season averages were even better than that.
Oh, incredible, mate. Just absolutely incredible. And I've mentioned to you on countless occasions through the first 5 episodes that we've recorded how much that I enjoyed doing this series and learning all these things about MJ. And I know that you're of a very similar ilk. Do you like the use of the word ilk? That was pretty impressive.
I often get it confused with elk, the other deer, the woodland deer, but I'm a fan of ilk.
I just wanted to buck the system and see what I could do there, mate.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, I won't go any further there, mate. To this point, our first 5 episodes have now covered from the end of Jordan's UNC career. We've gone through the whole Olympic trials, the Olympic training camp, the NBA draft, the exhibition series against the NBA stars, the Olympic Games themselves, the pre-season. You've talked about Jordan and his whole deal with Nike. So we've covered a lot of things, mate, in these first 5 episodes. And now, our next episode, we're going to be focusing on the NBA regular season. And I couldn't be any more excited if I tried.
Adam, I pride myself on being a knowledgeable NBA fan, and the amount that I've expanded my knowledge on MJ in between the time that you just mentioned from UNC through to his first game in the regular season as a Bull, the amount that I've expanded my knowledge in the last few months has been, I'm not sure on a percentage figure, but I've expanded my knowledge a lot, and it's been a lot of fun to try to learn all this kind of stuff brand new after having been a fan of the guy and a fan of the league for so long. So it's been a tremendous amount of fun so far.
Yeah, I'm ridiculously excited. It's probably a sad indictment on my social life, but I'm very excited to research even more about the regular season, and that will take place in episode 6 and beyond.
On the 26th of October, the Kentucky New Era wrote an article called Elijah and Jordan Ease into Rookie Spotlight. It spoke about Jordan really having the highest expectations out of all of the rookies coming out of the draft in 1984. And to continue on the understating tone of Jordan and his comments about his upcoming season, he said that he doesn't expect to take the NBA by storm, which has just moved into first place as the biggest understatement of the last 30 years.
Oh, I love it. Great find, mate. So that was from the article titled Elijah Jordan Ease into Rookie Spotlight, and that'll be in the show notes as well. Just wanted to quickly read from that. There's a couple of great comments and quotes that I'd like to mention. This came out on opening day, October 26th, 84. Chicago rookie Michael Jordan led the hapless Bulls to a 5-2 preseason record. Chicago hosts the Washington Bullets tonight in one of 6 season opening games. It goes on, he's already a superstar, Kansas City general manager Joe Axelson said of Jordan, the former North Carolina and Olympic hero. We were playing Chicago in an exhibition game in St. Louis. The crowd was about 5,500 and they were sitting on their hands until Jordan came on the floor. It was like somebody turned the lights on. The whole time Jordan was in there was a hum in the building. That gives a great little background there about the expectations that a lot of people in the league had about Jordan's entry as a rookie even back then in October of 84. And it also whets the appetite nicely for episode 6 of the NBA 85 series, which is going to get really interesting as we start to delve into the regular season itself. So some good times ahead.
Another article on opening day said it was hard to believe that MJ went third in the draft. MJ said he's seen the success of the White Sox, Cubs and Bears and said, I think it's going to be time for the Bulls now. The Cubs and the Bears at that time were both very, very good teams. The Bears actually won the 1985 Super Bowl. Despite all of the attention, Jordan retained a sense of humility in his rookie season. He did not ridicule the Blazers for not taking him in the draft. Early on in his first season, he told Sports Illustrated that the Sambui simply fits better with the Blazers than I would have, that the Blazers have an overabundance of big guards and small forwards. His self-effacement was more apparent when in that same article he said, I'd like to play in at least one All-Star game. It was at this point in time where I actually threw up in my mouth a little bit.
That's fantastic, isn't it? What a great quote, given that his first All-Star game would be in his rookie season, no less. That brings us to the end of episode 5, mate. I want to thank you for being a part of this episode again. I'm pretty sure I know how you're going to end this episode, but is there anything you'd like to add before we do finish off?
Actually, yeah. Aside from the other usual sign-off that I have, I am very much looking forward to talking about the other regular seasoning.
Oh, well played. That's great. I'll leave that in. I love that.
Giddy up.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show and share my web address with your friends and colleagues, inallairness.com. Check out the podcast archive for plenty more episodes with high-profile guests. Follow me on Twitter at inallairness. Please add your like to the show's social hub, facebook.com/inallairness. Join me next time for another edition of the show.